the Agile brand.
Welcome to the B2B Agility Podcast, where we look at the factors that drive success in B2B marketing, with a focus on the people, processes, data, and platforms that make B2B brands stand out and thrive in a competitive marketplace. I'm your host, Greg Kihlstrom, advising Fortune 1000 brands on MarTech, marketing operations, and CX, best-selling author and speaker. I'm excited to share this episode again. It aired a little while ago, but I thought it was worth replaying. Hope you enjoy. Today, we're going to talk about building a changemaker culture and how you can help your teams to thrive among change instead of being disrupted by it. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome Steve Blum, Chief Operating Officer of Autodesk. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Greg. It's great to be here.
Yeah, looking forward to talking about this with you. Why don't we get started with you giving a little background on yourself as well as your role at Autodesk?
Sure. So I'm currently the Chief Operating Officer at Autodesk, and my role is focused on all of the elements of go-to-market for the company. So I've got the worldwide sales organization, the customer success organization, our marketing team, our global revenue operations team, as well as all the engineering and product management teams that build the products that we use to engage with our customers and partners. So it's not the products that our customers use to create their offerings, but it's the products that we actually use to run the business. So everything associated with engaging with our customers or working with our partners is part of the COO organization.
Great. So we're gonna talk quite a bit about change today, and I wanted to start by talking a little bit about your own personal journey, which I think is in itself a story of change. You started your career as an electrical engineer before you became a sales and business leader. Can you talk a little bit about the changes that you've gone through in your own career that got you to the point of making that transition?
Yeah, so I did start as an electrical engineer, and I had a big passion for engineering and math and science and computers when I was younger. Started out working on with semiconductors at NCR. Ended up doing some work in a back room by myself on a tester. I came up with a testing technique for programmable logic devices and found some design flaws in many of the parts that semiconductor companies were making. So I shared those findings with those companies, and many of them made me job offers. Some of them were to become an engineering manager. But one company actually asked me to consider a role in sales. They said, we only hire engineers to go into field sales engineering roles. But between your technical background and your ability to communicate, you may want to consider this role. It wasn't something, Greg, at all that I had thought about in my past, but spent a lot of time talking about it with a colleague of mine who was already doing that role. And I spent a lot of time talking with my wife, and I decided to make the change and never really looked back from there. But I do want to highlight something. I've been very fortunate to have a lot of experiences after that role that gave me a rounding out of capabilities that I use in my role today. I went from being a sales engineer to a sales manager. From there, I actually took on a role in marketing, so I gained marketing experience. I then had the opportunity to run a global consulting P&L. And then I went into sales management and sales leadership. And when I look back now on those experiences, I'm applying all of those things as part of my role as Chief Operating Officer here at Autodesk.
Yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, a lot of evolution there. And I think there's probably a lot of people listening that they may be a little reluctant to make a change, although maybe they're, whether it's lack of satisfaction in their current job or just, kind of wanting a change. Like, how did you know that it was time to make a change? It sounds like there's been a few kind of iterations in your path. Like, how did you know it was time to make a change in your career?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't think there was a time where I knew it. I actually had to be open to opportunities as they came up. That, by the way, takes a lot of courage. Yeah. You have to be open to going down a path that's uncertain and unknown, even though you may be comfortable in the path you're currently on. So most of those opportunities came up not because I had decided I was done with what I was doing and I specifically wanted that other role. I was happy with what I was doing, but opportunities to grow, to expand, and to try new things came up. And I had the courage to go and give them a try because I realized if I could learn from that experience, it would round me out and I have greater feeling of where do I want to go in my future. So I would tell folks to be open to those opportunities when they come up.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. And yeah, being someone that's made a few changes of my own in my career, it's, I think nothing's ever easy, but I think it's almost like a muscle that you kind of exercise and it gets easier to kind of adapt and stuff.
It does, by the way. I mean, to your point, Greg, the more you do it, every time you take a chance and it works, you gain confidence that you can do it again. And actually you have a bolder role, focus on what next could I try to go do? So I agree with you. The more you do these things that are uncomfortable, the more comfort you get in doing them.
Yeah, absolutely. And this kind of segues to the main topic I wanted to talk about, and that's thriving amidst change as an organization, instead of being disrupted by it. Let's start by talking about some of your experience at Autodesk. So you've helped lead Autodesk through some major transformations, most significantly when you transformed your business model. I know you're in the middle of another big transformation right now with the move to platform. As we all know, change is not easy. I've been through several of these, and with some of the orgs that I advise and consult with. Never easy, but lots of ways to improve the process. What did you learn from the first transformation that you're now applying to this one?
Yeah, so there's lots of learnings. And interestingly, we're working through two different transformations right now. We have a longer term one, which is the move to platform. We have a more shorter term one, which is focusing on how we're reshaping our engagement model with our customers and our partners. So the business model transformation gave us opportunities to grow and learn that we're applying now. Here, a few things come to mind. First, whenever you're driving a big change as a leader or as leaders in an organization, you need to focus on communicating the whys behind the whats of the change. Oftentimes we go immediately to what are we going to change and how are we going to go change it? We don't spend enough time sharing why are we going to make this change and why is this going to be a change worth making for all the stakeholders involved, and what will that future look like when the change is completed so that people, all the stakeholders, can see I'm going to benefit from this change. It's worth it to go through the change. I'm going to go all in to support the change because I will come out ahead at the end of the change. And without doing that, it's hard to go and really connect with people because most people are change averse. They don't want to actually drive change and be a part of transformation, especially when it impacts the way they get things done. So the first thing that comes to mind is communicate the whys behind the what and keep communicating them.
Yeah.
There's another learning that we had. We created a scenario with the business model transformation where we like burned the boats, if I could use that term. We basically committed externally, we were going to be moving from a perpetual business model with maintenance to subscription by a certain date. So we basically moved forward and did not give ourselves a chance to go back. And that drives a lot of commitment. It forces people to deal with the change as opposed to delaying or hoping it will go away, which a lot of people end up doing. They're like, I just can hang tight here. This change will be reversed and we won't have to make the move. So creating the scenario where there's no return actually helps when you're driving a really big change. But when you do that, you have to be really clear that you're not going to get it all right. And we learned that through the first transformation. We're not going to be perfect. So we need to be agile during the change transformation window. We need to be prepared to adjust, to make changes that are still in support of the overall goal, but maybe changes in the steps in getting there because we learned something along the way. And finally, I'd say this, you really need to bring the stakeholders along for the ride all the way through, from the very first communication all the way to when the change process is over. You need to share learnings. You need to update on progress. You need to set expectations and then report out on those expectations all the way through. And going back to the first thing, you need to keep coming back to the why and reminding people, why are we doing this in the first place?
Yeah. And that kind of, that's a nice segue to, this idea that, change and transformation, it's often driven by, some type of business objective. Sometimes it's customer experience driven, but still, at the business strategy level. So, executives and leaders, they've got a view of transformation that is sometimes different from those employees. You mentioned people in general are, I would say, change averse.
Yes.
Once they get kind of comfortable in their roles and have a routine and stuff like that. So, what does a successful transformation look like to the team members involved?
Yeah, and it is tied back to what we were just talking about. You really need to focus in on what's in the change for them. People are going to say, what's in this for me? Why is this worth going through the change? Why is this going to be meaningful to my well-being? And after I persevere and get through all the challenge of the change, why will life be better for me? So the leaders who can see the business outcomes they're trying to drive toward need to work on reshaping what the future looks like for all of the stakeholders involved as a result of going through the transformation. Yeah. I will say this as well. Change is hard. And we all need to remember that. And the leaders need to have empathy for those that are going to be going through the change and may be impacted greatest as a result of that change, and having that empathy and showing that caring and understanding, yet focusing on being supportive and showing confidence and conviction that we will get there. We will make this happen, and the outcomes that we're striving for are going to be beneficial for all is really going to be key. So the leaders really need to embrace not only that it's going to be a challenge and people will resist, but they have to create the storytelling and the vision for why this will be better for all those being impacted. So the team members buy into it, and they will persevere, and they will have grit, and they will be resilient as they work through that change process.
To all the B2B marketers out there, the B2B Marcom Summit is the region's largest annual gathering of B2B marketing, advertising, PR, communications, and media professionals. It brings together professionals from brands, professional services firms, tech companies, and more to discuss industry trends, best practices, and challenges, all focused on B2B. The B2B Marcom Summit will take place May 23, 2024 in Reston, Virginia in the Washington, D.C. metro area, and just a few minutes from the Dulles Airport. I can't wait to join you there. Register today at b2bsummit.co, that's b2bsummit.co, and use the code AGILE15 for 15% off your registration fee. Before we get back to the show, I just wanted to remind you to hit the follow or subscribe button on your app to make sure you get notified when new episodes of this show are available. Now let's get back to the show. And so you mentioned taking an agile or iterative approach to doing this, and certainly I've seen that is certainly the most successful way that I've seen change done as well. How do you kind of know the right approach? I mean, you can do things iteratively, but they're still done in very big chunks versus small. Like, how do you gauge how quickly?
Yeah, so it's as I mentioned, we've used this kind of burn the boat, no turning back approach. But what we've done that is with the vision of the outcome. Once you have the vision of the outcome and you've built an execution plan to get there, you do actually work through phases of things. And by the way, it's really important, Greg, that the leaders have confidence in themselves and conviction in themselves that along the way, when you hit bumps along the road, that you're still committed to that outcome at the very end. So I've talked with a lot of companies about the experience that we've gone through, and in most companies really struggle with keeping that conviction. So you need to have that conviction, and then you have to take those iterative steps to getting there. Here's one thing that we've done, and we did this in the business model transformation, and in fact, we're applying it again right now in the transformation I mentioned about how we're reshaping how our customers and our partners engage with Autodesk. We've chosen one location as a pilot. That location, by the way, was Australia for us, and we went there first. So we launched the program. It was more of an MVP, of capabilities, but we launched it there. We learned from the experience. We knew we wouldn't be perfect and we had gaps, but we would actually quickly fill the gaps, get market feedback, get customer feedback, and then make changes, and then build that capability into the future. And so by choosing a place to go and trial it, we learned a lot that had positioned us to then be prepared to go and scale it in other locations. And that was really important because we were learning as we were going, but we were still running the rest of our business in kind of a business as usual environment in the rest of the world. So we told the rest of the world, we will share with you the learnings as we go, but you keep focused on doing things the way you've been doing them. We will go and try something very different in this one market. And then from there, we will take the learnings and bring it to the other markets around the world.
Yeah. And so doing an MVP like that, whether that's picking the market, which, in that case was Australia, picking, what maybe there was limited features or, limited change involved or something like that in an MVP often. How do you think about prioritization? There's a million things that could be done. There's a million things that will be done when all is the transformation is done. But, how do you coach teams to think about prioritizing the right things so that, the right things get done at the right time?
Yeah, well, this is a great question, and you're exactly right. Prioritization is key. When folks are going through change, they want the world to be perfect right away, which means they want everything out of the gate. And that's, of course, not what an MVP is all about. So we need to be really clear on what are the need to have things, the must haves, not the want to have things that will allow us to open up a brand new way of doing business, be able to engage effectively with our customers and our employees and our partners, but also recognize that it won't be perfect and that we will continue to iterate and get better. This is a really challenging thing to work through because when folks are going through that change, they want it to be perfect. And we've used kind of this model that we're taking progress over perfection in the way we go about doing an MVP release and then iterating on it. So we want to be able to have something that at least meets the market needs so we know we can operate. We then prioritize the feedback that we're getting along the way to make sure that we're picking the right capabilities that must be implemented next. And then we have an agile process of adding capabilities along the way. And then, of course, what we do is we share what we're doing and we communicate what we're doing to all the stakeholders involved so that when folks identify, hey, this is not perfect, there are gaps here, we come back to them and saying, yes, we hear you, you are right. We're working on these priorities first, second, and third because these are the must-dos, but we are also going to get to the other items that you're asking for. And then you have to deliver on those things and you gain accountability, trust along the way, and the stakeholders typically gain more confidence and more trust the further down the path you go.
Yeah. So you also mentioned how, with the Australia example, there was kind of two ways of doing things at the same time, right? There was the rollout of the MVP, and then other teams were focused on, let's maintain what we've been doing for the time being and stuff. And so, often, as in the case of these transformations, sometimes that falls on, the same team is kind of doing two different things at the same time. Sometimes it's separate teams. Sometimes it's a combination of both. How do you approach that as far as, making sure that the teams don't get distracted by the new at the expense of keeping the lights on, so to speak, as well as, having others or potentially even the same people focused on also improving the new? Like, how do you strike that balance?
Yeah, well, you're hitting on something that's really important. This balance is a challenge, and it's an ongoing challenge because we want to focus on the transformational work, the stuff that's going to be uniquely different, that's going to position us in a very different way in the future. But you also have to highlight the importance of the work being done by all those that are driving execution on a day-to-day basis. We're dealing with that right now in this transformation that I've talked with you about, in that there are some people that need to spend a majority of their time on the work associated with this pending or this imminent transformation we're on. And as a result of that, some of the other responsibilities that they have, they're not going to have time to get to. This is where the other folks on the team need to step up and fill in for their colleagues and help do the things to run the business while those that are dedicated to the transformation can do that transformational work. This is where it's really important for leaders to communicate not just with the people who are working on the transformational project, but who are working on all of your projects, and highlighting how they are providing impactful, meaningful work that benefits the company. Those that are filling in for those assigned to the transformation are in part helping that transformation be successful because they're stepping up for their colleagues and they're helping them out. So you need to make sure that you're recognizing all, that you're involving all, and that they all are making an impact toward this big new change. And you also have to recognize, and this is something that I talk about as far as being a change maker and driving big changes, Greg. Big changes, transformations are a team sport, and it takes all the people involved, people doing the work and the people who are doing the supportive work around them to keep the business running, that are required to make a transformation a success.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we've touched on, the change, not easy. People generally don't run towards change, barring a few instances, of course, but, it's hard to want to change the way that you work after, you get a new job. Let's say you settle in, you finally kind of get in the comfort zone, and now all of a sudden someone's coming in saying we got to change everything. And I've seen this in my work. I've seen people prior to me and my team coming in who have they've waited out a failed transformation or two, because they just knew if they kind of stuck to what they were doing, things would kind of ebb and flow and stuff like that. I'm proud to say my team was more successful than the past ones, but it's certainly, people can be averse to this change particularly when they don't see the end benefits. But what are some of the best ways that I know you've mentioned a few things already, but what are some of the best ways you've been able to manage just this general resistance to change?
Yeah. So first of all, you're exactly right. People resist change. We've been talking about that. Keep in mind that we were doing things for decades one way. So it wasn't just a matter of being comfortable. Yeah. It was kind of our DNA was doing work in a certain way before the business model transformation or before this transformation we're on right now. So there were a lot of people who were very comfortable doing things in a certain set of ways for a very long time. This is where, we always talk about the fact that change management is a really difficult thing to lead. And while change requires an investment in technology, automation, now the use of AI and things, and those could be very challenging things to build out. The people side of change, changing people's processes and their mindsets is probably the harder task to go work through, because folks don't want to make changes. And this is why, again, we have to go back to communicating the whys behind the what of the change over and over again, so that people understand why this is going to be a benefit to them and why it will be a benefit to their customers and their other colleagues that are going through this change. And communication has to happen frequently. It has to happen consistently. As a leader who's communicated through change, I get to the point, Greg, where I'm almost getting tired of hearing myself say the same thing. But until I've gotten to the point where I say, I can't possibly say it one more time, I've recognized I haven't said it enough. And it means I need to keep communicating that way. But it also means that there's a process that we need to make sure we go through with education, training, and enablement. If we're moving to a place where skills and experiences need to change, we need to help people transition to the new ways of working. So we need to provide the training and enablement, and we need to provide them the time to be able to learn new skills and new capabilities. Now, I will add one other thing, and this is the less popular part of the discussion, but there are times when you're making big changes where people may just not want that change, or they may not be capable of the change, or they may just not have the passion and enthusiasm to make the change. And it's those situations where you have to be open to having people opt out and choose to go somewhere else, because they just can't buy into the program or the big change they have to go through. And that's okay. And we've recognized that in our past and we've seen that happen, but we do provide the opportunity for folks to learn how to grow into the new roles and capabilities. And we want as many people as possible to make that transformation along with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Last question here. We've been talking a lot about the internal view of this, whether it's the kind of the difference between maybe how leadership and stakeholders might view versus employees. But, I also wanted to bring it around to the end customer experience, because at the end of the day, one of the primary drivers of transformations is often the improving the end customer experience. How do you keep a focus on that among all of the other stuff that we already kind of talked through?
Yeah, so it's a very important point. So I'm so pleased that you brought this up. The whole focus of my organization is delivering a world-class customer experience. It's our North Star of how do we ensure that we can turn the customer experience working with Autodesk into a competitive advantage that drives loyalty amongst us and our customers. So we put all of these change and transformation efforts into the context of delivering a world-class customer experience. And we communicate all the elements of the why the change. We will talk about why is it important for the employees and the stakeholders, but also why is this going to make life for our customers better, which of course then will produce dividends for Autodesk as well. So we also have done one other thing too. A lot of the elements of change that we've implemented, we're building out automation or technology or difference in processes or capabilities of our people that help improve and enhance the employee experience. And we're a really big believer in if you can continue to create a world-class employee experience, and that if your employees are engaged and they're committed and they feel the purpose of their work when they're communicating with customers, you will be in a position to deliver a world-class customer experience. So a lot of our change management is focused on improving not only the customer experience, but the employee experience to support that great customer experience. But to your point on how you began, I think everything needs to start with the customer. And if you keep the customer at the center and then talk about all the change associated with delivering a world-class experience to that customer, things work out in the long run.
Yeah. And totally agree. I think with that relationship between customer and employee experience, it's so I know there's some research kind of tying those things together, but I think there needs to be more talking about it, because I think it's such a powerful connection there. Well, Steve, thanks so much for joining. One last thing before we wrap up here. You've given a lot of great advice, a lot of great insights already. For those listening, what's one next best action you'd recommend for those leaders out there listening who want to be more successful in their next change initiative, maybe the current one that they're currently within? What would your advice be?
Yeah. So first, thanks for having me as a guest, Greg. I really enjoyed our conversation. The one thing I would highlight, something I said, that first, there needs to be that recognition that driving big changes or transformations is a team sport. And as a result, you need to bring the team along for the ride. So I want to double down on saying leaders need to over-communicate the whys behind the change. The why are we doing this? Why will this be better? We've got to make sure that if we're going to say what we're going to do and how we're going to do it, we anchor it in the why. Because when you can get people bought into why this is going to benefit them, why it's going to benefit their customers, why it's going to benefit the stakeholders involved, people can show up on a Monday morning and do something different with passion and energy, and they can persevere and push through some challenges along the way because they know they're getting to a better place. It's a place where they can go beyond what they've ever been able to do before. So I would just kind of reinforce that's the big takeaway. Everyone needs to do that next time they're talking with their teams.
Absolutely. Love it. Again, I'd like to thank Steve Blum, Chief Operating Officer of Autodesk, for joining the show. You can learn more about Steve and Autodesk by following the links in the show notes. Thanks again for listening to the B2B Agility Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can access more episodes of the show at www.b2bagility.com. That's B2Bagility.com. While you're there, check out my series of best-selling Agile brand guides covering a wide variety of marketing technology topics, or you can search for Greg Kihlstrom on Amazon. Until next time, stay focused and stay agile.